The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Support provided by Milwaukee Public Television and the UWM Center for International Education. Now here's your host, Rob Ricigliano.
Welcome to International Focus. Today's topic, immigration policy and the states. The perennially contentious issue of immigration reform has made its way predictably in the 2012 presidential campaign. Candidates have espoused policy prescriptions that vary from larger border fences and wholesale deportation to amnesty and pathways to citizenship. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear arguments over state-based immigration policies that critics say unconstitutionally infringe on federal law. Beyond the issue of undocumented workers, some analysts warn that in the years ahead, the aging native-born U.S. workforce may not be able to compete without an infusion of talent from abroad facilitated by changes in immigration law. The debate surrounding various aspects of immigration policy is familiar territory for today's guest. Doris Meissner served as Commission of the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service from 1993 to 2000. She currently directs the U.S. Immigration Policy Program at the Migration Policy Institute in Washington, an independent, nonpartisan think tank that studies the movement of people worldwide. Doris Meissner, welcome to International Focus.
Thank you very much.
So Doris, you recently published a piece in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and you talked about, the title was Overhaul an Antiquated Immigration System. And this seems to be a topic that a lot of people talk about. What I'm curious about is that there really seem to be almost two conversations going on here. One that you talk about in your piece about the kind of policy to bring the people into the country that we need in. And then there's another very emotionally charged conversation about how to keep people out that we don't want into the country. And we seem to be having more of that conversation, at least in the media and maybe on the campaign trail, than we should be. Or there's two conversations, we're not doing them in the right proportion. Why is it that we are spending so much time in that second conversation about who we want to keep out?
Well, that second conversation is the emotional one, and it's the people who are coming in illegally, of course, are breaking the law. And so that is offensive to Americans, and that creates all kinds of problems and issues because of a large population of people that don't have legal status. We are a democracy, after all. We are a nation of laws, and legal status matters. But I think that the illegal immigration also is an issue because it is largely from one country. It's largely from Mexico. Certainly we get illegal immigration from other countries of the world, but the predominant nationality is Mexican. We share a border with Mexico, so it raises the question in people's minds of border security and of law enforcement and so forth. One of the things that's always missing in that discussion is that a large part of what happens with illegal immigration has nothing to do with the U.S.-Mexico border. The largest group of people who are unauthorized are Mexican, but there are about 40 to 50% of the people here in an illegal status who came with visas properly issued, who then overstayed their visas. And
so it's
all
almost
of
half of that illegal population came in legally.
Exactly. And so no matter what you would do on the U.S.-Mexico border, even if you could seal it 100%, which we can't do and really don't even need to do, but even with very effective U.S.-Mexico border enforcement, you would have an issue, arguably, with illegal immigration that has to do with visa overstayers. Why? For both of those groups of people, it's jobs and job demand in the United States. Now, that job demand has now disappeared since the recession, and we actually are not increasing our net population size of illegal immigrants in the country, but that tends to be lost in the minds of people who are very, very emotional about the issue.
Affecting the conversation here. We're still having it.
Tends not to. And even when you demonstrate that that's the case, this is fundamentally an emotional issue more than it is an issue of let us reason together.
And And so, as you know, as you concede that we need to be having some conversation about what to do with that population. But as you note, that
absolutely,
it's not just about the Mexican population coming across; it's about the visa overstayers. As you argue, though, there's a whole big, even if we could successfully come to a consensus on what to do either along the Mexican border or with the undocumented population in general, would that fix immigration for us?
It would fix a little bit of the immigration problem, but this is a problem that needs a set of measures to go into place for us to get back to a point where our immigration system is actually working effectively for us as compared to loping along as a broken system. And I think to understand it, you have to understand a couple of things. I would start with the fact that our legal immigration system, which very much continues to operate and is a very important part of our history as well as our current and future lives as a country, it brings in about 1.1 million people a year. So it's substantial. It's a very large number, but almost 2/3 of those people come because of a family connection in the United States, which is a good thing, but it leaves a very small proportion of our actual visas legally to come to the United States for people that come for labor market purposes. And those people who are able to come for labor market purposes, job purposes in the United States, are almost entirely in the highly skilled, highly educated group, which again is important and we need it, but it's lopsided. We need a balance of people that can come for labor market reasons. In addition to that, though, we are, where the future is concerned, going to continue to need those people, and we're probably going to continue to need those highly skilled people in larger numbers because we are an aging society. We no longer are growing enough of our own native-born young people to take the jobs that are available, and because our native-born population does not like math, science, and engineering very much. And it is the math, science, and engineering tracks that are critically important for us as a competitive economy, for us to retain global leadership, be innovative, maintain our competitive edge. So it's very much in our interests broadly, if we want to continue to be a leading economic power in the world, to have an immigration system that brings the people that we need.
That raises for me a kind of almost a more fundamental question, which maybe I don't hear us talking about very much, at least publicly, which is, what is it that we really want or need out of our immigration system? Because some would think it's it's protecting our borders. Some, who might, be in businesses that need to bring in workers are thinking, I can't get enough people in to fill these skilled jobs. Speaking from a national perspective, what would you say we need to have out of a good immigration system?
Well, we certainly need to have some of the things that we've always had and that actually are working. Our immigration system is a mirror of our values, and one of the mainstays of it that we don't talk about at all, but that is working well, is that we do bring refugees to this country. So part of our immigration system is to signal to the world that in certain circumstances and in certain numbers, we will admit people who are likely to suffer persecution and they can resettle here. We also have, as I said, a very strong family-based immigration system, which is not just a fuzzy, sentimental kind of a thing. It, of course, is. It is a reflection of our values. It is part of what has made our immigration processes historically work well. People come as families, or they come in stages, family members, and that's an important value. But it's also very practical and pragmatic, because the family connection is its own social safety net in terms of helping the other members of the family who come, entrepreneurship, family businesses, that sort of a thing. So that needs to continue to be part of our immigration system. But the third purpose that immigration has always met has been labor market needs. And that's, I would argue, the part of the system that is seriously broken and needs to be overhauled, because it just does not reflect the current reality of this country competitively and this country demographically. So the labor market part of the immigration system, which really accounts now for a very small proportion of the visas that you can get legally, is insufficient. It's actually one of the major misunderstandings of our immigration today. And that is that people often argue about illegal immigration. Well, I may not like the fact that all these people are coming from other countries, but if they would just do it the right way, my forefathers came legally, they should come legally, they should get in line. There is no line to get into for most labor market purposes. We do not provide visas for labor market immigration beyond a very a number in the high skilled. And in all of those earlier waves of large-scale immigration where our grandparents and parents came, exactly, and certainly it's the story of this city and most parts of the country, but absolutely the Midwest, there were no numerical ceilings on immigration. Immigration did fluctuate with what the economy was doing and with what employers were recruiting for. That's different today. So today we're in a period, again, of large-scale immigration, but with ceilings in the statutes that are rigid and with labor market needs for which there is not a legal way to access the system. We have to change that.
We're just almost up against our break, but that really strikes me as profound in the sense that you're fundamentally then now reframing the whole debate around is the problem keeping undocumented people or keeping people out who are illegally trying to get in, to switching it around to say, actually, it's about we have an insufficient pipeline, basically. We don't have a way of these people coming in legally or meeting the economic needs in the labor force.
That's
legally.
Right. That's right. I mean, if you were asking the right question is to ask, what do we need in our labor market? What are the best ways to get it? Consistent with protections for American workers, wages being paid that are fair. In other words, to say that all those people who came illegally over the last 15 or 20 years should just have been given visas, that's not the answer. I mean, too many people came illegally because it was a completely laissez-faire, unregulated system. We need a regulated, rational system. But if it were rational and if it were aligned with the market and with market needs, it would have produced considerably greater numbers of visas than it did produce.
Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about how we should be doing that or having that conversation after our break. We'll see you back in a moment here on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus. We're talking about immigration policy and the states, and with our guest Doris Meissner of the immigration policy program in D.C. Doris, before the break, you were talking about sort of we really need to be setting immigration policy by looking at what the economy needs and then structuring an immigration system that would meet those needs, especially in the labor force area. So what's in our way of doing that, basically, of sort of taking a sort of a rational look at what the labor market needs are in the economy and then fitting the policy to fit that?
Well, there are quite a few things that are in the way. There certainly are established interests which kind of neutralize each other in terms of maintaining the status quo. But I do think that the biggest thing that is in our way is politics and the bigger problems in our political system today. We really are at a stalemate because we know, and more people do understand, and certainly more and more elected officials understand, that we need to address this and we need to fix it. We need to fix the problem of illegal immigration, but part of fixing the problem of illegal immigration is to create a rational immigration system that sets up a different construct in terms of the future and future needs. To do that requires bipartisanship. There has not been, in the modern era, a change in immigration law that has succeeded without a strong bipartisan center, because there are interests in both parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, on the extremes that are against, by definition, immigration. So you can't just have 1 or 2 or 3 crossovers. You need 5, 10 crossovers, and we're talking now about the Senate, in order to enact changes in immigration law. And that center has just disappeared, as we know from our politics and certainly from our legislative capability in recent years. The absence of the ability to bring that about is what is stymieing us in many areas, in energy, and I mean, we all know the major sets of questions that we face as a society where we haven't been able to move forward. Immigration fits in that list of issues.
Now, I don't want to. I guess I am putting you in the position of political psychologist, but what's the cause and the effect? I mean, in other words, is it because immigration is such an emotional issue that it keeps the politicians from really finding this bipartisan consensus, or is it politicians who are using the fact that it's an emotional issue as a way out of finding a
I mean, I think
consensus?
At this point it's become a circular, self-reinforcing negative, feedback loop. I do think that, I mean, there are all kinds of ways that one could parse that. I think maybe the interesting question is what can break that logjam, because we see it in so many areas of our national life now. On this particular issue, it is going to be a very important year politically. It is a year where it's quite clear now that immigration will be in the presidential debate. That was not the case in 2008, and it was not the case for one single reason, and that is that the Republican candidate, Senator McCain, actually was one of the few Republicans that has had a change-oriented, had that view that agreed with then candidate Obama. So there wasn't really a difference of opinion. We didn't debate it. There is a difference of opinion now at the presidential level. It's quite clear that whoever the candidate will be. And so this will be debated, and there already are quite some positions that are being staked out. I think that the real factor here to watch is the Latino vote. The Latino vote is increasingly important in our politics. It is the single largest block of voters that is up for grabs in our system looking forward demographically, and it is a vote that the Republican Party seems to be alienating itself from very actively. The Latino voters are not entirely enamored of President Obama anymore because of the immigration issue. They, in general, as a bloc, do not believe that the president has done enough on this issue. They want immigration reform, but as against the opposition, they may very well come out in very large numbers again. And if that is the case, then that will be yet again evidence to elected officials that this is a voting constituency that has to have more say in the way these issues are addressed.
There's pressure there then to have some resolution of this issue. You mentioned the need, really looking at this as an economic, a sort of larger economy or economic issue for the United States, and that seems like so far. I mean, is that the way to find a bipartisan?
Well, yes, but what the other ingredient, I would argue. I mean, the Latino vote, I think, being important is going to be one very important part. I think the other part of this equation is employers and business, what we would think of as the more traditionally mainstream Republican point of view that is more outward-looking, more internationally focused, and pragmatic. And those employers and business interests have to come to the table with elected officials in a significant way. They have from time to time in the past. They do on certain categories of visa issues, the high-skilled workers in particular, but it's been uneven. And their business would argue that they have other fights that they've had to fight that have been more important to them. Until employers really are engaged in a robust way in this discussion across the board, I think it'll be very hard to get that bipartisan center.
Now, we've seen the trend of the last few years has been to see movement on the immigration issue at the state level. And, the Alabama law has been under discussion, and the Supreme Court is now seized with this question about how far states can go in setting immigration policy. Is there a fundamental difference between how states think about the immigration issue and say how the federal government needs to think about the immigration issue in setting policy?
States, of course, have stepped into what they see as a vacuum. I mean, typically states have never been involved in immigration policy. It's a quintessential federal issue. But there's, huge frustration and demands by voters that something be done. And so you have these state laws that we don't know. What the Supreme Court does on this is going to be very important because there are states that are waiting to hear what the court decides in order to determine whether they should pass laws. If we continue down that path, we will have a patchwork around the country, and we will have situations, as is occurring now in Alabama. In fact, as we speak, Alabama is reconsidering its state law because the sponsors of the law have been so persuaded by their business constituents, by their employers, that this is really hurting the business climate in Alabama, that they're prepared to make some changes. It was a law that really overreached. But at the same time, so at the state level, you have in some ways the microcosm of what we've been talking about at the federal level. You have this clash of interests between employers and the more harsh voices that want these people to go. We may see that played out in a lot of states. But you do then also have states that are trying to find a way out. Utah tried to find a way out. Kansas is trying to find a way out by passing a harsh law, but then also a law that's asking the federal government for special exceptions to bring workers in for their industries that are in trouble. And Kansas is just asking now for agricultural workers to be able to be brought in. There is no mechanism in the federal law. Even if the federal government wanted to do it, this again is the problem with the rigidity of the immigration law. There isn't a way to respond to that. So it may be that at the state level, if we're unable to break through this at the federal level, it gets worse before it gets better in terms of the messiness of it.
We just have a couple of minutes remaining, and I want to give you maybe the ultimate question, which is if you were employed as a campaign consultant by both the Obama campaign and the campaign of the eventual Republican nominee, what would you whisper in the ears of those two candidates?
I think I would whisper in the ears to be truthful about this issue. Politicians and leaders have made the calculus that this is a good wedge issue. This is an issue where you where there's more reward in roiling it up and exploiting it than in sitting down and coming up with solutions. They believe that they will not be protected politically in coming to solutions. And I think what I would say is that this is an issue where you have to say, you may not like what I'm going to tell you, but let me level with you. Here's our demography. Here is what the unauthorized population looks like. The unauthorized population in this country, 63% have now been here more than 10 years. These are people that are rooted in our workplaces, in our communities. We've got to address this issue. I would talk to the American people about the workforce of the future. I would talk to the American people about the skills that immigrants bring, and I would plead for a rational immigration policy, describe it, say part of it is going to be medicine that we don't, maybe individually don't want to swallow, but taken together, our future depends on fixing this problem.
Doris Meissner of the U.S. Immigration Policy Program at the Migration Policy Institute. Thank you very much, both for giving cogent advice to our future political candidates, but also helping to explain a very complicated and very difficult issue. So, Doris, thank you very much. To our viewers on International Focus, we'll see you next week.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,